Well, the Paul Lansky piece was the one we started with. It's called Follow Me. Paul Lansky was one of the first composers that I managed to get a hold of, and he was really great. He sent that to me. He'd written the piece in 2002, and it was performed for a guitar festival by a group. And he made some changes to the piece in 2006, and this, I believe, is the first time the revised version of it has been played. It's written for 4 clean electric guitars, and like I said, most of it is single lines in a lot of Hocketing type of figures. And he even gives the direction on the piece much like Baroque music. You know, it's got a very steady pace to it, a lot of very sudden sort of terrace dynamics that's real common in Baroque music, and very much has that kind of feel to it, even though, like I said, it's not a Baroque vocabulary harmonically or melodically. It's almost kind of more like a Samuel Barber, Aaron Copland sort of feel. I don't know that those are his influences, but that's kind of what that harmony or sort of evokes in me is that kind of feeling. But and that's a really lovely piece. It really requires a lot of concentration for the locking parts. There's an awful lot of parts where people are playing offbeat sixteenths against each other, and that took a lot of rehearsal. And that one, as opposed to the other ones that I was describing, that one does have some things that are fairly difficult on an individual level to play. So I know that's one that everybody spent a little time working on. The next piece is called American Thighs by Betsy Biggs, and that is this sort of minimalist deconstruction, as she calls it, of this AC/DC tune, which I heard on a recording first. I was just doing some internet searches on things, and I found her website, and she had a recording of this piece for electric guitar quartet, and I heard it. I immediately fell in love with it. I just thought it was fantastic. It was performed once for one of the Bang in a Can marathon festivals, which they have in New York, that the Bang in a Can ensemble runs, and I believe it was just put together for that particular performance. But I just loved the piece, and so I sent her an email and I said, wow, I love the piece, I'd love to play this, and she was so enthusiastic and got back to me. And she was one of the composers I was actually in contact with fairly regularly all the way through the rehearsal process and all the way up leading to the performance, and so she was very supportive of that, and it was really great to have her input on that. And that's, as you might imagine, is just basically taking these figures from this AC/DC song, so we all play with distortion and sort of overlap these things in these parts that were given in the score in various order. And that deals with a straight up rock guitar vocabulary, basically, but you have to be able, it's sort of like asking a rock guitarist to play with Steve Reich, you know, that's that kind of thing, you know. Or it's probably not quite as maybe as structured as Steve, maybe a little bit more like Terry Riley, like a little bit more open, you know, but still, it's that kind of thing. And again, it definitely requires some proprietary rock guitar techniques to be able to pull that off, which she was pretty adamant about, that be there. The Mick Goodry piece, as I said, has a solo guitar movement that has some really challenging voice leading stuff in it. And then it immediately segues into sort of a 4-part jazz chorale almost, where the 4 guitars are playing mostly single lines, moving in chords, that just have this beautiful lush quality to them that Mick's music is so imbued with. And I just thought it was lovely. It's a very simple piece and not terribly long, but it just seemed like the perfect piece for the right place. You know, the real challenge in that one is just getting the voices to lock into a single sort of homogenized sound, you know, the way that you know, a good chorale would. That was the real challenge in that, is just listening and making that happen. The next piece is The Parallels by Robert Wanamaker, which is a spectralist piece. And Rob was somebody I was also in contact with, and he actually came to the concert, which I thought was really fantastic, and he loved it. But that piece uses techniques where, that's the one where we played the slides and the ebows on, and basically that one creates effects in the room with the sound waves themselves, which is sort of the nature of that kind of composition. Things are created in the room that aren't actually being played, and it's very specifically designed to do that. And what this piece does is it has you sliding over the course of 2 bars from one pitch to a half step higher. So you're basically laying on all of these you know, quarter tones and pitches in between getting from one pitch to another a half step apart, and in the process all of these pitches start beating against each other and creating rhythms, and as the intervals start getting further and further apart, the beatings start getting wider, and so different rhythmic effects are created. And it's one of those kind of things you really have to commit to that effect to make it happen, but hopefully we did that. It's not something that's immediately apparent when you start playing, and then when it finally locks in and you start to hear that, you go, okay, that's what it's going for. You know? The Frith is the last piece, Motormouth by Fred Frith. And like I believe I said at the concert, you know, Frith is one of those guys that when I even started on this idea, it was very important to me that I get something of his somewhere in there in the pile, because he's such a huge figure, not only in the electric guitar, but in composing, and he's written so much music, chamber music and larger pieces and dance pieces and theater pieces, and that use electric guitar and classical instrumentation. And so it was just one of those situations where I felt like I have to get something of his in there. Fortunately, there's a sort of a mutual friend of ours that lives in the Bay Area that I was able to hit up and say, do you mind if I sort of drop your name to Fred and I'm going to write him an email? And I did. I just sent him an email at Mills College and I said, here's what's going on. And he called me back, and we talked on the phone, and he sent me a couple of pieces, and this Motormouth piece is one, like I said, I brought into the band to just sort of read through, because it was the sort of the more manageable of the two. The second one that he sent me is a really long, like a half an hour, very involved piece, which we will definitely be tackling at another time. But Motormouth was just a shorter piece that was a little bit easier to put together. And that one's also a really challenging one to play, just in terms of the parts themselves. There's some really, really awkward things to play in that one. And that one uses the most effects of any of the pieces, because there's sections of it where he has all the guitars playing these various different figures, and he gives the indication that he wants a completely different timbre for every bar. So he literally wants it to go da-da-da-da, switch, da-da-da-da, switch, completely with a completely different sound, a vibrato, a tremolo, a distortion, a delay, or whatever. And so it was kind of up to us to plug all of that in. But that was something that it was really important to me that we not kind of back off of, that I really wanted it to have that impact, because when you have the 4 guitar players doing that at once, it's pretty massive. And that's what I really wanted. Again, it was a difficult piece and a lot of work, but I think everybody found that pretty gratifying.